So we have a new prime minister in the UK, the United Kingdom, Britain, England, the island in front of Europe. And I believe it's the seventh in 5 years or the fifth in 7 years, whatever. They don't even last a year. The shortest one lasted 30 days. So there's something rotten in the UK, not Denmark, in the UK. There's something rotten here. And just changing the person who is prime minister is not going to fix the problem. The policy has to change to fix the problem, because the current policy and policies are not working. How do we know that? Well, we had 7 prime ministers in 5 years, or the other way around. They're dropping like flies. And the reason is not that they personally are inadequate, though some are better than others. But the thing is, all of them have the same policy. And the policy doesn't work. So what you need to do is fix the problem, not fix the prime minister. Yes, send him off to the vet. Let's fix him. He's not the problem. The policies are not fixing the problem. So now you ask me, well, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that London and a small group of people are extremely rich, and the rest of England is very poor. And they're getting poorer and poorer and poorer every day. And the whole middle class in England is sliding down into poor. So you have 10% of rich, we have 1% of really, 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 really rich, but you have like 10% rich, and then you have about 20 or 30% of the middle class left. So yeah, 50% in England is poor. Now, truly look at the Dutch, like a small country, like Holland, like Denmark, like Sweden, and even France. These countries are doing fine. And why are they doing fine? Because they may have 10% of very rich, but they have a huge middle class. The middle class is like 60%. And then they only have 10% poor. If you have that kind of distribution of wealth, because it's all about the assets, it's the distribution of wealth, because the middle class usually owns their home. And they have a pension fund, and they have savings, and maybe they invest in the stock exchange. So the middle class has assets. The rich have too many assets, and the poor have nothing. They rent, they live from paycheck to paycheck, or they're homeless. Now, why is there no social or very little social unrest and not changing the prime ministers every 6 months in countries like France and Denmark? Because they have a huge middle class. And the wealth and the assets it could be better. And I do counsel these countries to make it better. But it's not as bad as in the UK. And the UK is not as bad as the United States. The fact that the United States is going to hell and to shit in the economy is because the K-shaped economy and the huge wealth inequality. But if you look at the UK, why is everything falling apart? Because there's a huge wealth inequality, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger every year. If you were to drive out into the smaller cities outside of London, London is really rich, and then the rest, take a drive, see how people live. You think you're in a third world country. That's what it looks like. Boarded up houses, homeless people everywhere in shanty towns and little tents, people going hungry, people being unable to heat their houses in winter. And it gets bloody cold in England in winter, I can tell you that. The majority of the children who are growing up right now in Britain do not have adequate heating in winter and do not have adequate food. They're the new generation of potato eaters. Let alone having a proper education and decent health care. Don't have that either, So what has happened in America and in Britain, and the first, is they're sliding down into what is the result of wealth inequality getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the gap getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So you get the poor is increasing larger part of the population. The middle class is shrinking. They're all falling down into the poor category. And in England and in the USA, poor means that you do not have your basic needs met. Think about that. They don't have adequate housing. They don't have proper food. They don't have an education, and they don't have health care, which is, think about a country in Europe or such a rich country as the United States, where 10, 20, 30% of the population does not have basic needs met. They don't have enough to eat. They don't have anywhere to live. The children are not getting an education. You are destroying your country, because these are the people who are going to work, who are going to go into research, who have to go to university. And imagine how many bright young children are not having a proper body development. They're being handicapped because they don't have nutritional food and don't have enough food, and they don't go to school, or they have a shitty education. You're destroying the base of your country, because you need all those people at the bottom to carry just a few people at the top. So we're basically going back to the situation from before the French Revolution, which means a huge, like in the French Revolution with 90%, but we're going in America, it's approaching 50%, and in the UK 40% of the population who are in abject poverty, who do not have their basic needs met, who do not have proper housing and proper food. Think about that. And they're being squeezed for taxes. So who's going to pay the taxes? That's the shrinking middle class, who keep shrinking and shrinking because the rich are taking everything from them. Because the rich don't pay taxes. Rich are parasites on society because they don't pay taxes and they evade regulation. So not everybody's equal for the law. Rich can do everything they want. They can murder and rob and plunder and rape, and they'll get away with it because they have enough money to pay for the lawyers and the politicians, etc. And they don't pay taxes because they own the politicians. They pay the politicians to implement their policies. And there are only two policies for rich and big companies. It's basically the same thing. The rich and the big companies want only two things: no tax and no regulation. They don't want to be bothered by the government. So what they did in the past 20 years is buy the government. There is no president and no politician, either in the United States or the UK, who will get elected without money from the rich. And it's moving into Europe to destroy our democracies by replacing democracy with oligarchy, with money buys politicians. Politicians do what the rich people want. And what do the rich people want? Get even richer. Look at how much money the rich people and Trump made in just a little over a year of office. It is just one big bonanza up there at the White House and the mansions and the private islands, etc., etc. Trump is deregulating everything. He is cutting tax on the rich and the big companies everywhere, and he is passing the bills and whatever he is cutting down on spending on ordinary and poor people. So Medicare, Social Security, affordable housing, etc. And he is spending more money on the military because the military is supplied by the military industrial complex. I just call it the MIG. And they're making huge amounts of profit. And he started the war in Iran to make sure that the oil price went up, because he has a lot of Texas oil and Exxon backers and supporters, and he gets a kickback, obviously. So if the oil price goes up, they make a lot of profit. Yeah. And if you want to know, and he doesn't give a shit, a fuck. He doesn't give a fuck about ordinary people, about people who are not in the 1 or 10% top. He just deals with the 10% top. And the 90% or the 99, as Occupy Wall Street called themselves, the 99 are just resources. You can plunder, and you can take their assets, and you can take their money, and you can take their labor for a very low price. So the 1% and Trump and the oligarchs, they don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about the 99. If the 99 were all of them starving in front of his Trump Tower, he would step over the bodies. And he wouldn't give a fuck. He'd call the police and say, get rid of all these poor people. They're bothering me. But the only reason he's rich is because they are poor. Because he stole their money. Because there's enough money, but it's not equally divided. So he doesn't give a fuck. And they don't give a fuck. So that's why I call them the zero fuckers. So in my world, you have the zero fuckers, and then you have the civilized society. In a civilized society, people share, everybody's needs are met. We make sure that everybody's equal for the law. Democracy is a true democracy based on true information and not tied to money, but on policy. People are elected on policy and not on platforms, not on money. They have a free press, free access to information, proper education, proper housing, proper medical services, and the basic needs met of everybody. A good, stable government with proper laws which are enforced for everybody. So it's a very trustworthy and stable investment climate where people want to invest their money and start factories and start businesses. That is a civilized society. If you look in the USA, they don't have a civilized society anymore. They have the zero fuckers because they don't give a fuck about anybody as long as they don't bother them. If they bother them, they just send ICE and kill them. Or kill a few so the others know what will happen if they bother the zero fuckers. And to zero fuckers, the 99 are just resources. People they can use for labor and people they can rob money from. And what else kind of policy do the zero fuckers do? Well, they when they're bought by the rich, the politicians are bought by the rich, so the zero fuckers decide what policies are executed. So it doesn't really matter if it's Trump or Vance or whatever. It's not the person. It's the fact that this person is bought by the 1%, by the zero fuckers. Now, Trump is using his position to become a zero fucker too, because he wasn't that rich when he started out. In fact, he's very bad at business and he lost a lot of money. And he lost his inheritance. But right now he's cashing using his position. But basically he's owned by the 1%. So I'm not really that interested in Trump because he doesn't make the decisions. He's just getting the votes in. You know, and the zero fuckers, the 1%, will choose to back whoever gets the votes. Like Reagan, like Trump, somebody who's popular, who can work a crowd, throw them into a frenzy of support. Gonna have to finish this video because I have my throat. So, we have the zero fuckers in the civilized society. Now, in England, we're going from civilized society to zero fuckers. And it's really moving this way. So it doesn't matter what person is in power. It doesn't even matter what party is in power. What they need to do is change the policy. Right now, the policy is don't tax the rich, don't bother the rich, do everything to help the rich, and take money from the poor. So what needs to be done is they need to change from zero fuck to Robin Hood policies. The same goes for every country in the world. The same goes for the whole world. Right now, too many countries are zero fuck countries. We need to change to Robin Hood policies. Tax the rich, make sure that regulation is for everybody. That also means antitrust legislation to break up the monopolies so we can have proper business development and economic development without all these monopolies choking our economy, because they're preventing progress, they're preventing research and development, they're just rent seeking. We have to make sure that we use our money to invest, and that the rich people use money to invest and not to buy assets. So we need Robin Hood policies and not zero fuck policies. So whoever the silent majority, the people who still have the right to vote, what we need to do is find the politicians who say, I support the Robin Hood policy. I want to take from the rich and give to the poor. I want to make sure that the rich are not buying assets, but that they're investing. I want a lot of money going from rent seeking, from monopolies, from asset buying. I want all the money to go into investing in new in research and development, investing in the energy transition, investing in a clean environment, investing in education, investing in healthcare, investing in infrastructure, and also investing in new factories, new economic development. Because what the zero fuckers are doing, what the 1% are doing, what the root of the problem is, not just that they're not paying taxes, so they're not contributing. So the shoulders who have to carry the whole budget is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, because the middle class is getting smaller and smaller, because the poor can't pay taxes and the rich won't pay taxes. So you're just, sucking out every last dime from the middle class, and the middle class becomes poor, and your whole civilized society collapses. So it's not just, and what rich people do is they buy assets. They buy houses, they buy stocks, they buy land, they buy companies, and they buy smaller companies, so their big company will have the monopoly. Just buy up all the competition, and you're the monopoly, and you can deliver shitty service, shitty products for a very high price. So that's why you want to break up these monopolies. So you want to stop them from buying assets, buying the houses, which is the reason the house prices are so high and ordinary people can't buy a house. You need to make them use the money to invest in R&D and new factories and jobs instead of buying stocks. Because the stock market's going up and up and up and up and up and up and up. But that is just a bubble. The only reason the stock market is going up is because the rich people just keep on buying and keep on buying, because every month they have this passive income. They have this rent. They have so many houses, they get all this rent. And what are you going to do with all this rent? So you buy more houses. But then there are no more houses, so the price go up. And then you buy stocks. But then there's not enough stocks to go around for all the rich people, so the prices go up. And that is why the 1% are really very happy with the way the economy is going now, because the assets are up, the houses are up, the stock exchange are up, the government spending is up with borrowing, so that's just your children being poor, and no taxes and no interference, and they can buy up, they can increase the monopolies. So there are these big fat companies who are crushing all the other ordinary people. And that is the problem. And the only solution is Robin Hood, tax the rich, and make sure they don't buy assets, they invest. What do they invest in? In R&D, in new businesses, and in education, and in health research, and health service. And in order to do all that, we have to, oh God, I've just had this thought and then it just, to change them from buying assets to investing means we have to break up the big monopolies. So have antitrust laws. And the United States did it at the beginning of the 20th century. And actually, they have to do exactly the same thing at the beginning of the 21st century. Because the only way you can have a growing economy with new products and new inventions and more competition is if you destroy the monopolies. Because monopolies choke your economy. They just take their monthly rent and they keep selling the same shitty products over and over again. There's no reason for them, for our research and development. There's no reason for them to make their products better. In fact, there's every reason for them to make the products even more shit. And they can just, lean back and take all the rent, because you're going to pay rent for the shitty house as well as the good house, and they own the water. Do you have any choice? Of course you're going to pay for water. So they don't have to do anything. Just sit back and take all your money. So tax wealth and make sure they don't buy assets, but invest and break up the monopolies so there's a healthy competition within the economy. It's that simple. It's like, 1925 all over again. And so that is what the UK needs to do. That is what the USA needs to do. But that is also what other countries in Europe need to do, what every country needs to do, because the rich are getting too powerful and they're destroying our economy, our world, and our lives. There we go. So vote for the Robin Hood policy. And I urge every politician to step forward and say, I'm gonna go for the Robin Hood policy. Vote for me and I will execute the Robin Hood policy. And I hope that the politician will come forward, and I hope all of us, the silent majority, instead of bitching about the economy, vote for Robin Hood.